Have you ever wondered why some women walk into a room and every man's attention quietly shifts toward them? And it has nothing to do with how they look. You've seen her. Maybe you've even envied her a little. She's not always the most beautiful woman in the room. She's not the loudest, and she's definitely not chasing anyone's attention. And yet, men remember her. They think about her long after the conversation ends. They tell their friends about her. Something about her stays with them. And maybe you've asked yourself, what does she have that I don't? Stay with me for the next few minutes, because by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what that something is. It's not a secret trick. It's not manipulation. It's not about being someone you're not. It's 5 specific traits, 5 ways of being that quietly rewire how a man experiences you. And once you understand them, you will never see yourself the same way again. Because here's the truth nobody tells you. Being unforgettable to a man isn't about performing. It's about becoming so secure, so emotionally rich, so fully yourself that being near you feels like coming home. That's what we're going to build today. So take a breath, get comfortable, and let's begin. Let's talk honestly for a moment about the pain underneath this question. If you're watching this, chances are you've felt invisible before. Not invisible in the sense that no one sees your face, but invisible in the way that matters, where a man looks at you, talks to you, even dates you, but never really chooses you. Never really fights for you, never makes you feel like the center of his world. Maybe you've tried to be exactly what you thought men wanted. You softened your personality when you should have shown it. You shrank your needs when you should have voiced them. You gave endless patience to someone who gave you crumbs of effort in return. And still, somehow, it wasn't enough. He drifted. He got distracted by someone else. He said you were great, but never said you were the one. That kind of pain sits differently than heartbreak. It's quieter. It's the ache of being overlooked, of watching other women get chosen, adored, fought for, while you wonder what's wrong with you. You start replaying conversations, picking apart your personality, your body, your worth, looking for the flaw. Was I too much? Was I not enough? Was I too available or not available enough? Here is what I want you to hear clearly, because it might be the most important sentence in this entire video. It was never about becoming a different woman. It was about becoming the truest, most emotionally solid version of the woman you already are. Because the traits that make a woman unforgettable to a man are not about performance. They're about presence. And presence cannot be faked. It can only be built. So let's introduce the big reframe. The idea that's going to change how you see everything from this point forward. Most women are taught that being desirable is about being wanted. But the traits that actually make you a man's dream woman are about being someone he wants to become better for. There's a massive difference between a woman a man wants to have and a woman a man wants to grow for. The first is temporary. It fades the moment novelty wears off. The second is the kind of woman men build a life around. Think about it like this. A man can want a beautiful sunset. He'll stop, admire it, maybe take a photo. But he doesn't rearrange his life around a sunset. What he rearranges his life around is a home, something he returns to, something that grounds him, something that makes him feel like a better version of himself just by being there. That is the shift we are making today, from being admired to being the emotional home a man cannot imagine his life without. Every single trait we're about to break down is built on that one idea. So keep it in your mind as we go, because it's going to click into place piece by piece. The first trait is emotional security. And I don't mean confidence in the shallow Instagram caption sense. I mean the deep, quiet knowing that your worth does not fluctuate based on whether he texts back in 5 minutes or 5 hours. Here's the emotional truth about this trait. Men can feel anxiety, not in an obvious way, but in the subtle tightening of a conversation, the over-explaining, the subtle need for reassurance disguised as a joke, the slight panic underneath a casual question like, "So, are we good?" Anxiety has a frequency, and men, even the ones who can't articulate it, pick up on that frequency instantly. It doesn't repel them because they're cruel. It repels them because instability is exhausting to be around, even when it's wrapped in love. Now picture the opposite. A woman who can sit in uncertainty without spiraling. A woman who can say, "I'd love to see you again," and mean it fully, without needing him to confirm her worth by responding a certain way. That kind of woman creates a strange, magnetic calm. Men don't just relax around her, they expand around her. Because for the first time, they're not managing someone else's emotions on top of their own. Let me tell you about a woman named Sana. Sana used to check her phone every 4 minutes after a first date, refreshing, rereading her last message, wondering if she'd said too much or too little. She'd talk herself into stories about why he hadn't responded yet, each one worse than the last, and that anxiety leaked into every date. Small jokes about being clingy that weren't really jokes. Questions like, "Do you actually like me?" disguised as playful teasing. Then Sana did something different. She stopped outsourcing her sense of safety to his response time. She built a life so full, her friendships, her hobbies, her own goals, that a delayed text became an inconvenience, not a crisis. And something shifted. Men who had once pulled away started leaning in. Not because she changed her personality, but because she stopped broadcasting anxiety and started radiating steadiness. Here's a line worth remembering. Confidence isn't built when someone chooses you. It's built when you choose yourself first. Say that to yourself the next time you feel the urge to shrink or perform for approval. You are not auditioning for your own worth. Think of emotional security like the foundation of a house. You can paint the walls any color you like, decorate however you want. But if the foundation is cracked, the whole structure shakes with every storm. Emotional security is that foundation. Without it, every other trait we're about to talk about becomes fragile because it's all built on needing external validation to feel real. The second trait is emotional intelligence. Specifically, the ability to understand not just your own feelings, but his, without losing yourself in the process. Most people think emotional intelligence means being endlessly understanding, always forgiving, always making space for a man's bad moods or mixed signals. That is not emotional intelligence. That is self-abandonment wearing a nicer name. Real emotional intelligence means you can read a room, sense tension, understand what someone is feeling, and still hold your own boundary steady in the middle of it. Here's what this looks like in real life. A man comes home stressed after a hard day. He's short with you, distracted, maybe a little cold. A woman without emotional intelligence either takes it personally and spirals into, "What did I do wrong?" or she matches his energy and the night turns into an argument neither of you wanted. A woman with emotional intelligence recognizes the stress isn't about her, gives him space to breathe, and later, calmly, without resentment, says something like, "I noticed you seemed off earlier. I'm here whenever you want to talk about it." That single response does something extraordinary in a man's mind. It tells him he doesn't have to perform happiness for you. He doesn't have to hide his hard days. He can be human around you, and you won't punish him for it or make it about your own insecurity. That is rare. That is unforgettable. There's a story that illustrates this beautifully. A man named Farhan once described his ex-girlfriend as someone who read him like a book, but never used it against him. He said that when he was anxious about work, she never demanded reassurance from him during those moments. She gave it. When he was distant, she didn't chase him with questions. She simply said, "Take your time, I'm not going anywhere," and meant it. He said that made him trust her more than anyone he'd ever dated because he never felt exposed or punished for having a hard day. Think of emotional intelligence like being a skilled sailor reading the wind. A bad sailor fights the storm, tenses up, panics when the water gets rough. A skilled sailor reads the wind, adjusts the sail, and moves with the current instead of against it. She doesn't control the storm. She simply doesn't let it capsize the boat. That's emotional intelligence in relationships. You're not controlling his emotions. You're navigating your own response to them with wisdom instead of panic. Here's a quote-worthy truth to hold on to. The woman who understands emotions without being consumed by them becomes the safest place a man has ever known. The third trait, and this one surprises people, is having a full, textured life of your own. Somewhere along the way, women were taught that devotion means making someone your entire world, that the ultimate proof of love is rearranging your identity around a relationship. But here's the psychological truth. A life that revolves entirely around one person doesn't feel like love to that person. It feels like pressure. It feels like weight. Because if you are his whole world, then he becomes solely responsible for your happiness. And that is a burden no human being can carry forever. Now picture a woman who has her own friendships, her own goals, her own hobbies, her own inside jokes with people who have nothing to do with him. She has a life that would continue to be rich and full even if he wasn't in it. That is not a threat to a relationship. That is what makes a relationship magnetic. Because when a woman like that chooses to spend her time with a man, it means something. It's not scarcity, it's selection. Think about scarcity versus selection for a second, because this matters deeply. If a woman has nothing else going on, every date, every text, every moment of attention becomes disproportionately important because it's filling a void. But if a woman has an abundant life, her attention becomes valuable precisely because it's limited and chosen. Men can feel that difference instinctively. The same way you can tell the difference between someone who wants to be with you and someone who simply doesn't want to be alone. There's a woman, let's call her Amber, who spent years believing that being a good girlfriend meant dropping her plans whenever he wanted to see her, canceling girls' nights, putting her own hobbies on pause. She thought this made her irreplaceable. Instead, it made her predictable, and worse, it made her disappear. The man she was dating started taking her for granted because there was no contrast between time with him and her own full life. There was only him. When she finally rebuilt her world, rejoined her pottery class, reconnected with old friends, started training for a half marathon, something changed. She had less time for him, and paradoxically, he wanted more of it. Because now time with her felt like a privilege, not a default setting. Think of it like a garden. If you pour every bit of your energy into a single flower, watering it obsessively, hovering over it constantly, you often end up drowning its roots. But a garden with many flowers, many things growing, creates an ecosystem, a richness, a life force that draws people in simply because it's alive and thriving. A man doesn't want to be your only flower. He wants to walk into your garden and feel amazed by how much beauty already exists there, and grateful that you've made space for him in it. Remember this line: the moment you become someone's entire world, you stop being interesting to explore. Full lives are magnetic. Empty ones, no matter how devoted, eventually feel heavy. The fourth trait is the ability to communicate honestly, even when it's uncomfortable. This one might be the trait most women underestimate, because we're often taught that being easy to be with means never causing friction, never bringing up hard conversations, always keeping the peace. But here's the thing men actually crave, even if they'd never say it out loud. They want a woman who will tell them the truth, kindly but clearly, instead of a woman who smiles and swallows her real feelings until resentment builds into something unrecognizable. Think about the difference between these two responses. A man cancels plans last minute for the third time. Response 1, it's okay, no worries, while internally seething. And 2 weeks later, exploding over something small and unrelated, leaving him confused about where all that anger came from. Response 2, hey, I noticed this is the third time plans have shifted last minute. It's totally fine sometimes, but I want to understand what's going on so we're on the same page. That second response isn't cold, it isn't dramatic. It's honest, direct, and it respects both people enough to deal with reality instead of avoiding it. Men remember women who can do this. Not because conflict feels good, nobody enjoys conflict, but because honest communication creates trust. A man who knows you'll tell him the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, never has to wonder what you're really thinking. He never has to guess whether your smile is real or performed. That kind of transparency becomes deeply relaxing over time, because guessing games are exhausting and clarity is rare. There's a story worth sharing here. A man named Imran once said the reason he fell in love with his wife wasn't the big romantic gestures. It was a conversation early on where she told him, calmly and without blame, that something he'd said had actually hurt her feelings. He said most women he'd dated either pretended to be fine or turned it into a huge fight. She did neither. She simply told him the truth, like it was a normal, safe thing to do. He said in that moment, he realized he could be fully honest with her too, because she'd shown him it was safe to be human and imperfect around her. Think of this trait like a bridge under construction. If you build it with weak materials, hiding problems, avoiding hard conversations, patching cracks with silence, it might look fine for a while, but eventually weight and pressure will reveal every weak point, and the whole thing can collapse without warning. But a bridge built with honest, reinforced materials, difficult conversations had early, feelings expressed clearly, can hold enormous weight over time. It bends under pressure instead of breaking. Here's a line to remember. A woman who tells the truth kindly becomes a man's safest place to be honest to. The fifth trait, and in many ways the trait that ties everything together, is warmth without self-abandonment. This means being able to give love generously, affection freely, softness openly, while still keeping your own boundaries and self-respect firmly intact. This is the balance so many women struggle to find, because we're often shown two extremes. Either be cold, guarded, and unavailable to protect yourself from getting hurt, or be endlessly giving, endlessly warm until you've given away every boundary you had. But the truth is, the most unforgettable women aren't cold and they aren't doormats. They are warm, but they have a flaw. They can be affectionate, nurturing, deeply present, while still saying clearly and without guilt, this is where my limit is. Here's why this matters so much psychologically. Warmth without boundaries teaches a man he can take without giving back, because you'll absorb it either way. Boundaries without warmth teach a man that closeness comes with punishment, that vulnerability will be met with coldness. But warmth combined with boundaries creates something incredibly rare. Safety and respect existing in the same person at the same time. Let me describe what this looks like practically. A woman who can say, I love spending time with you, and I also need you to text me if plans are changing. That matters to me, is showing both warmth and boundary in the same breath. She isn't punishing him for a mistake. She isn't withholding affection to teach him a lesson. She's simply being honest about what she needs, while still being loving in how she says it. That combination, warmth plus clarity, is what makes a man feel both adored and respected at the same time. There's a story about a woman named Manor, who used to believe that setting boundaries would push men away, so she never did. She said yes to things she didn't want, tolerated behavior that hurt her, all in the name of being easygoing. But the men she dated eventually lost respect for her, not because they were cruel, but because a person without limits starts to feel less like a partner and more like a background character in someone else's life. When Manor finally began setting gentle but firm boundaries, saying no when she meant no, expressing hurt when something actually hurt, she didn't become less lovable. She became more magnetic, because now her warmth meant something. It was chosen, not automatic. Think of this trait like a lighthouse. A lighthouse gives warm, guiding light to every ship that passes, generously, consistently, without asking for anything in return. But it never moves from its foundation. It never crashes onto the rocks to chase a ship that's drifting away. It stays exactly where it is, grounded, warm, unwavering. And the ships that need that light find their way to it precisely because it never abandons its own position. Here's the quote to remember. Real warmth doesn't mean having no limits. It means being generous with love while still standing on solid ground. Now let's bring all 5 of these traits together, because separately they're powerful, but together they create something transformational. Emotional security gives you a steady foundation. Emotional intelligence lets you navigate connection with wisdom instead of reactivity. A full life makes your presence a choice, not a necessity. Honest communication builds trust that can survive real life. And warmth without self-abandonment lets you love generously while still respecting yourself. Here is what I want you to do starting today. Pick one of these 5 traits, just one. The one that feels the most unfamiliar or the hardest for you right now. Maybe it's emotional security. And this week, your practice is simply noticing the urge to check his phone activity or reread a text 5 times, and instead redirecting that energy into something that's yours alone. Maybe it's rebuilding your full life. And this week, that means texting an old friend, signing up for that class you keep postponing, filling your own cup before you try to pour into someone else's. You don't have to master all 5 traits overnight. Nobody does. This isn't about perfection, it's about direction. Every small choice to regulate your own emotions instead of outsourcing them. Every small boundary you hold instead of abandoning. Every honest conversation you have instead of avoiding is a brick in the foundation of becoming genuinely unforgettable. Not because you performed it, but because you built it. And here's what I want you to carry with you as you close this video. You were never meant to shrink yourself to be chosen. You were never meant to abandon your own needs to keep someone interested. The traits that make you unforgettable were never about becoming someone new. They were about finally standing fully in who you already are. Secure, wise, full, honest, and warm, without apology. The right man isn't looking for a woman who performs perfection. He's looking for a woman who feels like coming home. And when you build these 5 traits, not for him, but for yourself, you don't just become unforgettable to the men you meet, you become unforgettable to yourself first. And that, more than anything else, is what changes everything. If this video gave you something to think about today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because we're building a community here of women who are done shrinking and ready to grow into their fullest, most secure selves. Give this video a like if even one of these 5 traits hit home for you. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Out of these 5 traits, which one do you already have strong? And which one are you going to start working on this week? Write it down below, because saying it out loud is the first step to actually building it. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.